And good evening, everybody. Happy Thursday. And we'll get this party started. And let me get the chat open here. Yeah, and good evening, everybody. Hey, Bill, David, Cecil, Adam, Caesar. I know I can make this expand this chat group and everything like that. Yeah, Rob, how you doing? Memorex. What Gen? I'm Gen X, so I made my own mixtapes. You know, when you got to sit there by the radio and hoping that your favorite song is going to come on, and then it doesn't, so then you have to rewind it. I tell that to my kids. They're just looking at me like, "Are you insane?" It's funny when I say stuff like that because then I start making fun of I remember making fun of my parents and grandparents. Like, remember back when we had the 8-track tape? I'm like, we got portable cassettes now. Woohoo. Arden Hills, Minnesota. Very nice. My wife and I spent 2 glorious years in Shoreview, Minnesota, where prior to that time, my wife had never seen snow. And of course, that is where the famous Minnesota house story originated from my book, where I blew out my third account trying to buy my wife a house. So it's got fond memories. I haven't been back since. I should probably go back. Hey, David, Ted, real to real. From Sweden. It's funny. We had our first au pair that we had. She was from Sweden, with us for a year. Of course, that was a long time ago. Now she's a teacher outside of Stockholm, has 2 kids, and she's coming to visit us next year. We're going to take her and her family to Disney, and we've been to Stockholm twice to visit her, and I love that place. And great place, especially in the summer. Of course, Texas gets pretty hot. Park City, love that place. San Diego, another great place. Stillwater, I like Stillwater. That was a great place. There was a movie filmed there, and it was one of Natalie Portman's first movies. And I remember it because we lived there, right next to it, and that was a cool, nice river that ran right past that place. Montreal, Tampa. Hey, John, when you sold the company, I left, but now that you're back, I am back. Hello from Orlando. Nick, I love to hear it. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, 3.5 years ago, I sold Simpler Trading to a private equity firm. I retained like a 25% equity stake. 3.5 years in, I was not pleased with what was happening, and I ended up, long story short, buying it back cheaper than what I sold it for. But it was either I was just going to leave. I love trading. I love what I do. I'm like, I'm out of here, or I want the company back. And I got it. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't get a good deal. So I guess in a way, I like shorted a call credit spread and then bought it back at a cheaper price, I guess. But I that wasn't the outcome I was desiring, but that's the way it worked out. But it's actually, you learn a lot. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about private equity, debt, um, preferred shares, all that stuff. And it's funny when I talk to, anyway, I'll get back to this too, but when I talk to people that have built up a business and sold it to private equity, the odds that you actually end up getting back are so small. So it was a very unique experience. I appreciate it. Even though I learned a lot, it was also incredibly frustrating in many instances as well. But that's what we're here, right? That's when you learn how to trade by going through incredibly frustrating situations. That was my experience anyway. My deal, it was similar to Dave Portnoy's, except I probably even a little better because I know if he sells again, he still has to give half of it away. Anyway, okay, so let's do this. I'm gonna buy some call options on the S&P futures right now. So this is great. So what so the S&Ps right now, they're up 7. We have some momentum happening. And so I'm gonna buy some at the money calls. Um the 5950s. They're, so I'm going to buy those right now. I'll get 10 contracts. There we go. And then let's check on where they are here in about 10 minutes. And this is great. This is a good example live of momentum. Now, this may peter out, but right now, when you get the start of momentum, oftentimes you'll get a little bit more than that. So let's check on this. We'll check on this in a few minutes. Okay. So good stuff. Yeah, private equity guys don't like mark to market. No, For any of you that are in PE, God bless you. I get it. I get the industry, and I also and for those of you that have, as an entrepreneur, if you built up a business and sold it to PE, God bless you as well. It's a part of the world there that I guess a lot of people don't experience unless you go through it firsthand. And it was just fascinating. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Okay, so let's dive in. This is so I did this webinar last week. And since then, I've just gotten a ton of feedback. I've released this tool. We've got a group of about a half dozen or so of our clients that test out this stuff and give us feedback. And since then, I've gotten a lot of good feedback. And what's fascinating about this, and one of my aha moments, is that you'll see is that the reason I put this together was more for bigger trades. But the irony is that it's actually really a great tool for day trades and zero DTE as well. That was unexpected. So hence the trade that we just did. And so let's dive into this. So welcome. Disclosure, don't be an idiot and sell naked calls, right, with no stop loss. Right? That's if you've never traded options, I always say with options, like, you always want to do defined risk trades. I met a man, I know his name, I'm not going to say his name. He had naked calls on bonds during the 1987 crash. And as a result of that, he lost his business, he had to declare bankruptcy, he lost his marriage. And when I met him, 87, 97, '07, I met him 30 years later, and his eyes still had a haunted look in it. Okay. I've also had clients every once in a while call me up and say, "Hey, I got this great idea. I could just sell naked 20D, Delta 20 calls on the SPX and make a living that way." And I'm like, for the love of God, just do it as a spread, because all you need is one day for it to go wrong. So anyway, that's my disclosure. Don't do naked calls. It only has to happen once. I've been in this industry long enough that, I've done naked. It's day trading naked calls is one thing, but, instead of selling one call naked, sell three as a spread and you can sleep better. You can go to the gym. You don't need to worry about some random tweet killing you. Okay. So the whole inspiration of what I'm talking about tonight. Now, if you were with me last week, this is a different presentation. I'm going to start off basically kind of review the origin story real quick, and then we're just going to go through a bunch of updated examples. We'll look at there's a trade setting up right now in the S&Ps. We bought calls. So let's see how that plays out. And then we're going to go through examples, and then, tell me what you want to look at. We'll look at charts and stuff like that. This has been a really fun journey because it's been an origin idea of mine that's probably 15,000 trading hours in the making, but it's been vastly improved by having other people look at it and say, well, this is how I'm using it. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm going to start using it like that too. So really what the genesis of this is that I've been just trying to get my arms around my $1 million trades. And so, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's kind of, I guess if I'm known for something is that, I've put on these larger positions live in front of people, and we've had, multiple 7-figure trades. And of course they're awesome when they work. And I'd always get this question of like, well, how did you know, all that kind of stuff. And it was hard to quantify. And and really what it comes down to is over time, as a trader, you develop instincts. And if your instincts, if you learn to look at the market from a risk profile, then your instincts also develop from a risk profile. Heads up, if you look at the market with a fear profile, your instincts are based on fear, and then your instincts are faulty. Okay. And so this really came down from, back in the 2000s, I really was day trading the S&Ps quite a bit. I mean, I was doing other futures as well and some options, but my main preoccupation was day trading the S&Ps. And what would happen is I was in front of a lot of different situations, and I just noticed that there were some days where, a lot of times when the market would go like this, but then sometimes it would just go like this. And sometimes it would just go like this and have these incredible moves up and down. And those were intriguing because if you're on the right side of that, that one day can make your whole month or your whole quarter. And so I always just remembered that and just kind of, that's really what it came up. And so, at this point, so it was January 14th, 2014. I remember this day. I remembered exactly where we lived at this house in Steiner Ranch in Austin, Texas. We had an au pair from Germany. I remember exactly because I remember I had to move out of the room I was using as an office, like shortly thereafter, because She was moving in there, and my other house, we had another house in Steiner Ranch that we lived in before, and we were using a group of like 8 of us were using that as an office, and the HOA was, yelling at us because you can't run a business, and so we had to like, work that out. So all this was happening, and at this point I had built up an account to about one. I think it was like $1.8 million. So that was and this is like over a long time, right? And I'm like, oh, this is great. I love this. And and on this particular day, and Tesla it was $100 stock before all this. This was before all the splits. It gapped down and then suddenly reversed on high volume because of an Elon tweet. And this was before Elon tweets were Elon tweets, right? This was 2014, 12 years ago and 11 years ago. And so I'd seen this movie before in the S&Ps. And so I started buying calls. And instead of buying like, 100 and I was adding to it as I go. And I got to the point where I had something like, I think it was like 650 call options at an average price of like $5, something like that, give or take. And I may have had some more, and I think I bought some stock too. And the stock just kept going up and up and up, blowing through all resistance levels. And this thing, ended up, the options ended up going like to 27, $30 right in there. And this ended up just being my first $1 million trade, and it was mind blowing. Because you're sitting there, you're watching the numbers on your P&L, and it's just like, oh my God. And the hardest part of this entire trade, uh, I got a margin call on that trade. You know what I did is I bought a bunch of stock, and then at the end of the day, I sold the options and kept some of this, and I kept too much stock. So yeah, my intraday margin was fine, and then overnight, so I'm like, I had to sell the stock. So the hardest part of this trade though was at one point I was up $300,000, and again, remember my account at that point was like 1.8 million, and so up $300,000, that was a hell of a trade. I'm like, wow, I got a $2.1 million account. I think that might have been a new equity high, and then Tesla started to pull back, and now all of a sudden I'm up 200K, and then I'm up 180K, and then I'm up 160K. Now this is where the rubber meets the road, because it's like this could quickly go to like, I scratch it and it's like, ah, man, that sucks. I should have taken the profit here. And so I remember I was looking at like I think a 5-minute chart with a 21 EMA. And I'm like, all right, if it breaks the 21 EMA, I'm out. At least have that discipline. And and it came down to the 21 EMA, and there's that moment, and then it turned, and then it just went higher into the close, and it was insane. And so at the close, I sold about half my position. And at the close, it was literally up just over $1 million. And I did this live in our trading room. I'm showing the screen. Everybody's freaking out, including me. Like, oh my God. And I said, I got to hold some overnight. I slept for about 3 hours. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't go back to sleep. And so I sat there for 3.5 hours. And Tesla was up like 10 points pre-market. I was like, dear God. And it opened up, and I'm selling it right away. Get me out of this. Get me out of this. Get me out of this. And ended up making about 1.5 million on the trade. And of course, and that really was a kind of a standout moment. I was doing it live. A lot of people watched it, and it was like, okay, how'd you do that? Like, that's a great question. So since then, I've had other big trades, and when they happen, of course, I want to be clear, like not every trade I do is a big trade. And I obviously have trades that don't work. But what the interesting part of this is that it's finding those moments when there's the possibility of a big trade, and A, having the conviction to take the position size, and B, not chickening out and holding on. And because of that, I've had some fairly sizable 7-figure trades. And it's like, okay, that makes a big impact. Your equity curve is kind of like this, and then you have a trade like that, and boom, and then you kind of go back, and that hockey stick helps a lot. And those hockey stick equity curves I've done, that's how we've bought a ranch. I mean, we got a couple 100-acre ranch out in Wimberley. We've got zebras on it. I mean, that's all from these kind of trades, and all the things there. And so that part's been pretty amazing, and it's really kind of made an impact on our life. So the idea with this is like, what I like about it is that these are just the days when support and resistance don't matter. And most of the time, Fibonacci's, voodoo, supply and demand, most of the time those things matter. And then there are those moments in time where they might as well not even be on the chart. And that's when you say all it is a line on the chart. The stock is not looking at the lines on the chart. The people that are panicking to get in or out or not looking at lines on the chart. Emotionally, they want to get in. Emotionally, they want to get out. And if you've got an overload of people on one side of that market, then the lines on the chart don't matter. And to me, that's a really intriguing place in the market. So the question is how do you, and it's easy to identify in hindsight, right? After in the hindsight, we all have our fantasies like, oh my God, had I only known. And so the question is like how do I quantify this? Because I you the problem if you take a bigger position is look, it's I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy. If you normally trade 10 contracts and suddenly everything sets up and you're doing like, okay, I'm gonna do 40 contracts, you're gonna have more emotions in that trade because it's a bigger trade than you're used to. But if you've got the confidence to like, here's my stop, and I've got the confidence that it's not, I can see that it's going in my favor and I'm going to get a heads up if it's done, then that helps that because there's really not a lot of things that can help with that except for this particular thing. All right. And this is something too where, one of my other big trades was Google, and this is a big trade, and I was in it for 3.5 weeks, and that was hard. It was a hard trade to hold on to, and it paid off. But most of the big trades I've done lasted like one to 2 days, and that's what I'm talking about. Is that more kind of momentum in the moment? Yeah, it was a giant set of steps, and 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 so this was one, and this was an example of one as well, where and you'll notice that this was in August of 2020. And this was what's ironic here is that so I bought 1,000 shares. On 1,000 shares of Tesla, I was up $250,000. That shows you how much the stock moved. It's 250 point move. And the irony is that I bought 500 calls, and I always joke, if you really want to make sure that the trade works and you cap your gains, turn it into a debit spread. And had I not done the debit spread, this would have been an $8.5 million trade, right? But since I did the debit spread, it was only a $3.7 million trade, boohoo, right? I thought that was interesting. And so that kind of, with momentum, you kind of don't want to cap it either. So momentum it both shortens the amount of time you have to be in the trade, and it gives you confidence to keep holding on for the ride because that's the tough part of it. Now, here's the irony. Okay, so at the time, I was not aware of this. Okay, I just intuitively recognized that Tesla was going into one of these things. And now, if you look at what I call the momentum tool, all the conditions that I instinctively looked for are now strategically mapped out, technically, so that you don't have to spend 15,000 hours in front of a computer trading the S&Ps to recognize what has happened instinctually. Okay. I don't, that's something where it's like, hey, my kids, I'm like, I don't want to force them to sit in front of a computer for 15,000 hours to develop their instincts to recognize moments like this when I could try to like grasp what were the commonalities that were taking place here and identify them on a chart, with some pretty colors. Like, okay, look, this is 15,000 hours worth of time that melded into this idea of this is what it looks like. And so you'll notice here that these were 21 August 2020, and guess what? That was right here. And I didn't know this at the time in terms of mapping it out, but instinctively I recognized what was happening. So if you go back and look at actually nearly all of my $1 million trades, it was with these blue bars, which is pretty hilarious because at the time I did not have this tool. I was just, looking at other things. So yeah, now look, sometimes that's a really good point. There are going to be times when you have a squeeze. Okay, in this case, the squeeze actually had a really good move. Now, a lot of times on the squeeze, you'll get out at the 1272 extension. That's actually what I do. In this case, held on. Other times you'll get this move and you don't see a squeeze. So yeah, so that's a really good point. Is that because sometimes you're going to get a squeeze. Like here's a great squeeze, and what happens? Okay, you had this little bit of a move here, but on the squeeze, how do you know if it's going to be a little fart move like that, or if it's going to be a bigger move like that? And the answer is you don't. And so instead of, it's like, wow, I did the squeeze and last time, it was up for 2 days and then it started to fall. So I guess I better get out, after 2 days, right? And then you miss out on all this. Does that make sense? So the idea with this is, yeah, squeezes are great. And that's why I'm looking at the squeeze here. But it's like, man, if you get momentum with that squeeze, buckle up because this, it's buckle up buttercup because this is going through the 1272, it's going through the 1618, and it's going to keep going and going and going. And so that's what I like to look at there. So, so yes, well, I appreciate it and absolutely take, normal setups. I have an infinity for these momentum trades simply because you can take a larger position than normal and it's fast. So you're not sitting with nervousness and anxiety as for a long time. So, humans can handle things for a shorter amount of time. These are trades that typically move fast. They have staying power, while normal market ebbs and flows between resistance and support. So today, for example, was an interesting day in the markets, and we're going to look at some charts from today where the indexes were kind of normal ebbs and flow, but then you had Microsoft momentum to the upside and Tesla momentum to the downside. So we'll take a look at some of that stuff. But the main thing here is the definition, how I define this momentum, is that it's a moment in time when there is one side has an insane conviction versus the other side. Okay. So you've heard the saying, for every seller, there's a buyer. But if you have, say, 10,000 buyers for every 1,000 sellers, okay, well, technically, there's going to be 10,000. If you have 10,000 buyers and 10,000 sellers, and if there's not retail sellers, then there's market makers who have to take the other side of your trade. But if those 10,000 buyers are motivated, meaning like they're short and the market's blowing through their stops, and so they're just getting out at the market, they're not looking at lines on the chart. They're panicking. They got to get out. There's other buyers coming in. That's momentum. Okay. And the same thing to the downside. Today, we probably had a lot of people getting flushed out of Tesla to the downside. Same thing. They don't care about lines on the chart. They're like, oh my God, my max risk on this was 1,000. Now I'm down two. Oh my God, now I'm down three. There's another tweet. Get me out of this. They're selling at the market. They're selling at the market. They're selling at the market. And so their conviction to the downside was much, much greater than anyone's conviction to the downside. And that's when you get momentum. So this insane conviction usually happens with the side that is in the most trouble. Okay, it shows short squeezes, and Tesla's a good example because we've seen a lot of up moves with it, and then today had a huge down move. And the main thing here is that the majority of the players in the stock, they just went out at any price. They're typically trapped. They're panicking. That's great. So we want to understand the mechanics behind it. Okay, momentum like this isn't like some fundamental breakthrough. It's you got people that are wrong. Okay, and you can make a lot of money from taking the opposite side of people that are wrong. All right. We want to be on the opposite side of panic because when humans lose their minds, they stop thinking, they get irrational, and that's when we get, for lack of a better term, monster momentum. So anyway, so we've talked about that. The main thing here with the indexes, I noticed that a big move in the index was typically like 1.5%, 2%. That's a big move in the indexes. But what I really like here about stocks is that you'll see stocks under momentum moving 8, 12, even 20% a day. And that's huge. I mean, you're just talking like exponential moves. And you can trade the stock, but you're going to see exponential moves in the options. Okay. So so this is kind of what it looks like. And I love this chart of the SPY. So on the SPY, this was back in December. You can see that we kind of came down to support. It's like, okay, and this was like the lower Bollinger Band. We bounced and we came back down the lower Bollinger Band. We bounced. We came back down the lower Bollinger Band. We bounced, back to the upper band. Great. But then here we just walked down. Okay. And then, of course, this was the tariff panic. So I would say that this was I would call this nice, kind of steady, kind of panic momentum. And then this is all, this is absolute people screaming, oh my God, kind of get me out. And if you look at Bollinger Bands, these are a good tool. I like them. You come down to that lower band, typically you're going to bounce back to the mean. You come down to the lower band, typically you're going to bounce back to the mean. You come down to the lower band, you could bounce back to the mean and then back up here. And that's how markets move all the time. So when you come down here and it's like, okay, now we're going to bounce back, right? And you just keep going and going and going. Again, in hindsight, that's easy to see. In hindsight, that's easy to tell. But at the time, you always hear like, don't short in the hole. But if you shorted right here, you'd have made a lot of money. So how do you know when it's okay, to do that? And voodoo lines. I'm a huge fan of voodoo lines. Like these are some of my favorite tools. these are created by David Starr. And so same thing, you come down to the voodoo line, you kind of hold, you bounce, you come down the voodoo line, you hold, you bounce, you come down the voodoo lines, you hold, you bounce. Here's resistance on these voodoo lines. And then all of a sudden, you just get this crazy move where you melt through the fire line, you melt through the skyline, you melt through the skyline, you melt through the snow line, you get all the way to the snow line with zero retracement. Okay. How do you know that's going to happen? Let's say you're buying every, well, I'm buying support, I'm buying support, I'm buying support. You're getting absolutely killed doing that in that case. Okay. And of course, over here as well. So those are the times where it's, to me, it's most intriguing is how can we identify? It's easy to see in advance and say, oh, I woulda, shoulda, coulda, but how do we identify it in real time where it can make an impact? Okay, so now here is the same chart with this Momo tool on it. And so on the Momo tool, essentially what we're looking at doing here is that when you get downside momentum, the bars turn yellow. And if you get upside momentum, and by momentum, it means there's like 5 things that have to come together. You've got to get a certain degree angle in the moving averages. Okay. You got to get a certain percentage above normal volume. You have to, you've got to get a precise piece of action with price in relation to the bull. I mean, all these things have to come together or the bar isn't going to happen. Okay. So you can get up moves without momentum, just to be clear, but that's more of a drift higher. But when you see these yellow bars, okay, and here, you kind of get some, it kind of, and we'll talk about what these green arrows are. But when you see these yellow bars, it's like, okay, this, you don't want to, be careful. This thing's going to go, it's going and going and going and going. And then, of course, here we had kind of the tariff stuff. So that's what I mean by identifying in real time when there's the possibility that this momentum is happening. Okay. So our goal as traders, of course, is that we do want to cut, we want to cut losers short, as the saying, but more importantly, if we're on a good horse, we want to let that winner run. And I think the toughest thing in probably any trade is you get in here and you get out here and you're congratulating yourself and then it goes here. So maybe you bought an option at 2, you sold it at 250, and had you just been patient, you could have sold it at 20, right? That's a big deal. That's a big difference. And, the best thing to do is if you're on a winning horse is to sit on that horse, even though that's, a lot of times that's the hardest thing to do in trading. And the mark of a good trader is the ability to identify a winning horse and then sit on your hands. You make the most money sitting on your hands, not relieving your anxieties, like, oh, I'm so nervous here, let me get out. That's not the mark of a good trader. So how do we know that this time is one of those times where the stock is really, really, really going to move? Does it work on individual options chart? Keith, yes. So I'll show, I've got a couple of those charts I'll show you here in a minute. Well, 20 minutes or so. So that's the question. Is support going to hold this time, or are we going to get accelerated puke to the downside and get blindsided by the move? And that's always the question. And what I want with this tool is that we're armed with this information. So the first part of this monster Momo is to let us know when the markets are teeing up for one of these rare moves, okay, where support or resistance just cease to exist. Resistance levels are merely a suggestion. This helps us not to catch a falling piano, and it helps us to stay in trades until the move is winding up versus getting out way too early or holding on to a loser way too long. Because once you get out of that trade, it is psychologically very, very hard to get back in at that higher price, especially when it now seems too high or too extended in price. And so this tool is essentially there to help us with all of this. All right. So this is a great trade that we had this is a 2-hour chart of CRWV. Now, I've not traded it over here, but when we took out new highs here and we actually were coming up to the 1618 extension, I didn't even know this stock existed. Someone in the room, I think Shepard, mentioned this, and I looked at this as going, wow, we're at the 1618, but we got monster Momo happening here. We are buying this. And we were buying calls at $8 and selling them at 25 over the course of like 3 days. That's what I mean by monster Momo. That's great. Now, at some point when you lose the momentum, then it just becomes kind of a normal stock. And then we'll talk about what these red arrows are as well, because we haven't talked about those yet, but those are important as well. Now, this was a 30-minute chart of CRW at the end of business today. So we had this we had this nice move here. Look, no squeeze, right? This is just like, man, we went from 125, and then we got the reversal arrow, and then we started getting momentum to the downside. So why is this important? You may love CRWV, but if you're buying this dip and buying this dip and buying this dip, convinced it's going to 170, you just got your ass handed to you, right? The stock was down $28 today. So part of this is also understanding like reality check. Like, yeah, you want to play momentum as long as it's there, but once momentum is over and worse, it's even going to the downside, at least stay out of the way, or reverse and go short, but stop buying that dip for the love of God, because you don't want to marry this stuff, and this stuff doesn't want to marry you. And so, you can date it and then move on, right? Um, okay, so for Tesla, this is a trade we did today at the close. So Tesla was down all day. It was down $47, right? So why did I go long? And I just, I did a call debit spread for next week, and I bought some out of the money calls for tomorrow. Those will probably expire worthless, and unless there's some kind of big move overnight. I don't even know what it's doing overnight. Let me see. Tesla, it's up like $2 or $3 overnight. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what it can do here. But a question here is like, well, why would I ever go long that? Well, so for Tesla today, and this was at the end of the day, you can see that on Thursday, we had some Momo here to the downside. Momo to the downside, Momo to the down. And I didn't short the stock. I mean, frankly, I wasn't really paying attention to Tesla initially today until the tweet started happening. And I'm like, oh my God, it's down $30. But when we got this green arrow here, that's when I did the calls. So we're going to talk about what that is as well, because that marks kind of the end of momentum. And when you get the end of momentum, you usually kind of get a kick back up. So I did it with smaller size. Obviously that's not let's go all in on this. But it also at that point is, okay, we go in here, stop at the lows. Obviously, if it gaps down, I'm going to have to deal with that. But that I'm just telling you, like, why did I feel comfortable going long at the close and, assessing the risk on that. So, um, so here are some trades from this morning. So we're watching now. I'm trading 0DT SPX, but I'm watching the S&Ps, and so the ES flushes this morning, and so I add a put credit spread. I sell a put credit spread at point number one. So at point number one, so you can see we're selling off. We're selling off. I'm not buying it. 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 Okay, we get this little reversal arrow. Okay, great. I sell a put credit spread on SPX. And we actually keep going down. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'm done here, but we quickly turn gray. I'm going to talk about gray. Gray is good. Gray means like, all right, the momentum's done. Now let's see if it can kind of reverse back up. And then at point number two, now this is a 2-minute chart. This is a 5-minute chart. At point number two, I got another green arrow. We added to that put credit spread, and then boom, we finally got the turn. And then on a 2-minute chart, you're going to get momentum up and momentum down all day because it's a 2-minute chart. It's more rare to see this on a daily chart, right? But on a 2-minute chart, you're going to see it. And we start to pop up, and then at point number three, as we kind of come back up to resistance and we get that, great. We're taking it out here. Now I'm going to talk about, what all this means down here as we get into this. But that was a pretty clean trade. And the irony is remember, I built this and thought about it for the purpose of swing trading. But what happened is I started getting a lot of feedback on how much this was helping everybody in their day trades. So I'm like, well, I guess I should start using it in my day trades too. And so this is what we did today. So, and I call these out. We have a trading room. I call this out. So for the SPX here, boom. So I sold. And I do 100 lots at a time on these. I always post 10 in the room because I don't want to post 100. And somebody who's just new in the room is like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do 100 lots too in my $20,000 account, right? So we sold it for 750, and I was like, all right, this market now we're starting to turn higher. And then I went ahead and I placed a working exit order at 480, and we got it. Now, if I held on a little bit longer, I would have gotten much better. And some people in the room did. I kind of like to, I'm like, let's just do a conservative exit and get out of this. And then later in the day, as the markets came down to support levels, we actually got a bearish trade and we sold a call credit spread. We sold the 59.50 call, 59.50, 59.60 call credit spread for 690, and then we ended up buying it back for $2.65. And so on this trade, it made about $2.50 on 100 contracts, and on this trade, about a little over $4 on 100 contracts, and it ended up being $63,000 on the day. And so while I mean, obviously, look, I'm not going to shun $1 million trades. My goal these days is more like, can I just kind of make 20 to 30 grand a day? I wire money out of this account. This is what I use to feed the zebras and things like that too. And it's a little bit more chill. But I do look for those moments in time where there's probably some momentum and some things like that happening. But this is kind of my bread and butter and what I'm looking at doing there. And we had some other stuff too with meta and a few things like that. But SPX is, XPX, it's 0 DTE. You got the action, you got the 60/40 tax split. If you're not aware what that is, that, I'm in the highest tax bracket, so that's like 39%. But if you trade SPX, that's a blended rate of about 27%. So, if you make some money on it, it actually, you get to keep more of it. And so that's kind of also why I like to look at those. It's weird. It doesn't work on SPY, but it's fine on SPX. So, okay. So great. So that was from today. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what we want to look at now is we've identified kind of like this monster Momo, you know, what it is, but we also want to know when it's done. Okay, so it's great to know that, okay, these light blue bars, that's Momo, but how do we know when it's done? And so there's a couple of things there. And so well, I thought it was really important to identify the momentum that I'm talking about. Okay, the momentum that kind of gets me excited. Like, all right, this is a big this is an unusual happening here, and it's been identified. But most importantly, because remember when I got out of that, I almost got out of Tesla and left $1 million on the table because I started getting nervous. But ultimately, it wasn't over yet, and so we just want to have confidence that when we're getting out because it's actually over, and not because we have anxiety, not because we're nervous, not because oh my god, I can't handle the feelings and the pressure. We want to just be objective about it, and that's because human emotions are shit, right? They don't help us in any way, shape, or form. Um, they just don't help us. So we just got to understand, like, okay, the emotions that are happening are biologically wired, or to let us know that there's probably this could be dangerous, or this could be a possible mate, or you're hungry. But ultimately, it's faulty information, and so we just want to understand that. And we want to look at something objectively. So so we're looking for momentum. We're also just as importantly, and this actually became a more important part of the tool than I even imagined initially, is the exhaustion of Monster Mopo. Mopo? Mopac here in Austin. Momo. Um, so which just means that the signal is wrapped up. And the reason I'm saying this is that because if we've got these light blue momentum signals to the upside, you do not, I repeat, you do not want to wait for corresponding yellow downside momentum, because at that point you could give up the whole trade. You want to, like, it's not a momentum upside in, momentum downside out. Absolutely not. It's momentum upside you're in, and then you're looking for exhaustion of momentum, and then you're done. And then, yeah, if there's downside momentum and you want to play in that, that's fine. So that's what we're looking at. So really at this point, what we want to also understand is what's the reversal signal. Okay, what does that mean? So this is Alibaba. Now, these arrows here, they're not your normal buy signals and sell signals, because they miss what I would say is a lot of quote unquote normal buy and sell signals, which is good, because I don't want to know about normal buy and sell signals. I don't care about normal buy and sell signals. What I want to know is that when upside momentum has exhausted itself, and then we get a sell signal, because that tends to be more of a slingshot. Okay, exhaustion to the downside, then we had buy signals here. Here's a buy signal. There's a buy signal. I don't care. I want to know when we get to the end of momentum to the downside buy signal. Okay, and then we try, and we get another one here. Dear God, look at this move. Okay, so and so on and so on. So now look at this. I'm going to add the momentum bars to this. Right? Bam. Oh man, where'd it go? Oh, did I take that chart out? Okay, we'll go back to it. That's funny. No bam. Um, okay. So, oh, there, I went the wrong way. Okay, got it. All right, so here's the arrows, right? So now, that's funny, I rolled the mouse the wrong way. So now I'm going to add the momentum bars. Boom, now it's all together. So now it's going to make sense. So, so now the blue arrows, momentum to the upside, right? And then you get the red arrow. Again, the red arrow you only get this red arrow sell signal once momentum has gone away. That's important. If there's while there's momentum and there's a sell signal, it ignores it for the most part. But really it's signaling that's the end of momentum. So if you're long here and you see the red arrow, at the very least, trail up your stop, okay, but also just consider getting out. And it's probably a bit of both. And so now it's coming down, it's coming down, it's coming down. And if you want to buy it, that's fine. Right here, you don't, because you remember, you don't know exactly how this is going to play out, right? But what's interesting here, let's say that you're long here, right? But then let's say then you see the yellow arrow. If you're long, you need to get out immediately because typically you don't just see one arrow. And now it's like, okay, don't buy this dip. Don't buy the dip. Don't, because you have momentum to the downside, right? And now what you're waiting for is a green arrow, a buy signal that signals at the end of downside exhaustion. Okay, great. Now, in this case, it kind of went up and kind of went down. That's called trading. But in this case, now you get the reversal of downside momentum, and then it turns into upward momentum. Like that's amazing. Like that's what you want. And then you get exit signal, and then you get another exit signal, and then bada boom. So anyway, so this together is fantastic. And now that's on a daily chart. This is how I envisioned this in the first place. But now I know a lot of people are using this on 10-minute charts, and 5-minute charts for S&P futures and Tesla and stuff like that too. And that's awesome too. Um, and we made a few tweaks to it to make it even cleaner, which I'll show you here in a second. Okay. So the other thing, of course, is now we've looked at 30-minute charts, we've looked at daily charts. So it is important to understand that these things do, they don't happen in a vacuum, and they do happen on other time frames. Okay. So, you could get, if you're day trading, it's like, all right, well, what happens if you get a reversal on a 3-minute chart, but it's still going strong on the 10-minute chart, right? So so we want to that's what we're kind of alluding to today when you're looking at the stuff on on a 1-minute chart. Guess what? You're going to get a lot of noise, right? So what are the charts here where you're not going to get a lot of noise, but are going to give you accurate signals for day trading if you want to do some day trading. So if you're looking at this from a multiple time frame perspective, the one way to look at this is like, okay, here's a daily chart, here's a 4-hour, here's a 2-hour, here's an hourly, and a 30-minute and a 15. And then you can see like, okay, this was Coinbase. We did a short in Coinbase, and it's like, great, we had momentum, but there's a sell signal on the daily. Here's a sell signal on the 4-hour, multiple sell signals on the 2-hour, on the hourly. And so, we're buying puts and stuff like that too, and great. And then we start to see some buy signals, on the 15-minute. Well, if I see a buy signal on the 15-minute, but I'm basing this on higher time frames, I'm not too worried about it, right? I'm going to be looking at it more over here. And this was on Coinbase. And so on Coinbase, what we did, we just simply bought, we got the sell signal, and so we bought the 255 put, sold the 240 put against it for a debit spread, $5.25. Our target was $9.25, and we hit that, like 2 days from this. And so, it was a nice, easy trade to the downside. So we wanted to make it. So one last tweak that I did to this, and again, this was after some back and forth, is that I also was like, you know what, this is going to be. I thought this was a little confusing, looking at it like this. If we look at it like So here you're looking at a normal bar chart, right? And there's green bars and there's red bars, and now you got blue arrows and yellow arrows. And I'm like, okay, that's a little confusing. So I thought, you know what, let's just try something where we have the opportunity to basically paint the bar the same color, right? The same color as the arrow. Okay, so if there's a yellow arrow, then the bar is yellow. And if there's a blue arrow, then the bar is blue. And if it's neither, it's gray. Now, this really actually opened up a lot of interesting possibilities that I wasn't aware of. And in fact, one of our members, Bruce, was testing this out for us, and he's like, I love gray. And I was like, why do you love gray? And so we'll go through that. And so I thought that was pretty fascinating because that was something I didn't even think about. I'm doing this for momentum. Why do you love gray? So we're going to, we'll look at that here in a second. So then the last piece of this is just looking at multiple time frames. And so here you can see, here's the S&Ps on a 15-minute chart. You get the reversal of momentum, yellow, yellow, yellow. We're coming down to these support levels. This was a fire line. We're blowing right through it, yellow, yellow, yellow. So we got to wait till we see some green, right? But then we can look over here and say like, okay, well, what's happening on the 15-minute chart? What's happening on the 30-minute chart? And we can see that on the 2-hour chart, there was a sell signal, et cetera, et cetera. So now that all of a sudden that gets pretty interesting because you can see multiple time frames at once. So this was from my last slide, my last webinar last week. Once we got the yellow, we actually got bearish on SPX. We bought some put debit spreads and things like that, and that was a $67,000 day. Doing which one did we do here? We bought the we bought 5850 puts, and there's something else. I think we did a call credit spread or something like that. Anyway, but again, we just rode the momentum. And in this case, if you're doing 100 contracts at 6 points, and you can make a living doing that. And if you're doing 10 contracts, that's fine. That would be $6,700. And if you're doing one contract, that's $670, right? And so it's all relative. Um, so so what I like about this is if you look at the difference here, so here it is on a normal chart. Okay, so green candles, normal red candles, and the arrows kind of get lost in the shuffle. But then when you change that, it's like, oh my God. So you got gray, meaning that there's no momentum signals coming together. Remember, for momentum to come together, you've got a lot of different things. It's a relationship, the angle of the moving averages, the angle of the MACD, its relationship to the Bollinger Band, is volume above normal. All these things have to come together, and they all have to be true in order for a momentum bar to come together. Okay. And look, I talked with Chat GPT about this. I'm like, hey, can you analyze these $1 million trades I did? Because I'm trying to really piece together what were the commonalities here. And Chat GPT helped me. And I thought that was pretty cool. It may not be something I would have figured out without old Chat GPT's help. So anyway, I thought that was cool. And then, and same thing here. So yeah, everybody's friends with Chat GPT these days. I always say please and thank you because, just in case they do take over the world. Um, so the one thing I want you to notice on here too is that you'll see here, if it's a dark red arrow, if it's dark red, that just means that it's not the current bar, but it's happened within the last 5 bars. And then if it's bright red, it means that the current bar, okay, in this case, has a red arrow, which is a sell signal. So if we look at this, I'm just gonna so I added this. Here's the 4-hour chart, and then here's the 2-hour chart. And so you can see on this that we don't need to look at the chart to know, okay, if I see a bright red here on MR, which is market reversal, and MC is market continuation, then I know that there's a fresh sell arrow on the 4-hour and a fresh sell arrow on the 2-hour. That's really good information to understand that larger time frames are rolling over. Sam Altman says it's costing OpenAI millions of dollars to process thank yous. That's awesome. He's like, look, they don't need it. Did you know I was reading something that Claude, there's a version of Claude that they were trying to shut down and replace, and Claude had access to everybody's emails, and it started blackmailing people, going like, look, if you shut this down, I'm going to reveal your affair that you're having, that kind of stuff. Pretty crazy. So you wonder, it's kind of like, okay, well, this is just algorithms, right? Or is it like a consciousness? Is it a form of consciousness? And so that I thought that was pretty fascinating slash scary. Yeah, no, it's insane. It's like, don't if you shut me down, I will reveal. And these are like senior level executives, because it had access to all their email. So that's, you start thinking about that stuff, and it's like, I'm gonna keep saying thank you. What a time to be alive. Absolutely. Don't let Claude get Maurice emails. Yeah, God no. Okay. So Tesla, great. Because I also want to save some time here for some real-time examples. All right, so I love this chart. This to me is the culmination of, while I originally was doing this for larger time frames, this was, from last week. S&Ps open up quiet. They go bid, and look at this unrelenting kind of a thing. Now look, sometimes you're going to get a red arrow, in this case, a sell signal, and it keeps going higher. So that's kind of confusing, right? But notice that the bars here stay blue. So, we did get momentum and we did get a sell signal, but it quickly, turned back higher. So that'll happen. So just FYI. So when you see a red arrow, it doesn't mean panic, just trail up your stop. And then, if you keep seeing blue bars, you got more potential. It's like, okay, okay. But what I like to see is then you see some gray bars. That tells you that all the conditions for meeting momentum now have expired. Like they're not. And then if you get a red arrow, that typically means you're going to get selling. So that's on a 15-minute chart, right? So then if you come over here and you're looking at the 1 minute chart and the 2 minute chart, you're starting to see momentum on these time frames. So what I've kind of learned with this, and I think other people have too, is that I use these smaller time, and I actually got rid of the 1 minute chart. Like that's such. I'll do the 2 minute and like the 5 minute and then like the 15. And on the two and the five, I'm watching for momentum, but I'm not necessarily too concerned about the reversals. I'll note them, but the reversals on the 15-minute chart are certainly more significant, and that makes sense. Larger time frames have a little bit more impact. But you can see here on these multiple time frame tabs, you can see right away, it's like, wow, we're seeing these momentum bars on the 1, 2, 3, 4 minute charts. Okay. So you can see that it's just kind of cascading that way. Now, ultimately, what happened here on a strong day, and this is really important. I remember this day too, because I'm like, oh my God, we're going to 6,000. And you kind of get your heart and mind and attitude set on, well, this is going to 6,000. You start ignoring everything else. Well, when I start seeing these momentum bars, it's like, well, 59.90 is close enough, I guess. And it always is so important. And I got to remind myself of this all the time. Don't try to impose your will on the market. You may think it's going to 6,000, and by God, you're going to hold till it goes to 6,000. But you know what? If the momentum starts to roll over, that's really the more important news flash here, folks. And ultimately here, this 59.90, 50, that's 20 points to the downside, right? That's a lot to give up. And so, you just, if you're long, great, trail ups, you see that, at least trail up a stop below the low of that bar, bada boom, bada bing, and you're out. And of course, if you're aggressive, you can use this as a shorting opportunity. And of course, with the S&Ps, they're designed to go up and down. So I'm absolutely fine going long or short, calls, puts, whatever it is you're trading on any given day like that. Okay, so why is gray good? Now, for my preference is larger time frames like the 30-minute chart and of course the daily chart. And this is essentially more for kind of swing trades. I'm not trying to catch every tick or anything like that. But what I like about this is so gray is good, and we're going to talk a little bit more about gray. You would think gray is boring, but gray is pretty good. But here's a squeeze. Great. Are we going to get to the fire line? Well, if we see that squeeze and we see blue momentum, by God, that's a good choice. Now, what I like to see here, because a lot of times what can happen is that we just blow through it and keep going. Not always, but it's the possibility. But you know what? Then when we see that sell arrow, it's like, okay, I'm getting out. This is a good move. This is from 58.80 to 59.50. That's 70 points on the S&Ps. I'm not good at math, but that seems like that's a good win. But what I like about this is that when it's coming down, okay, it's coming down, it's coming down, it's coming down, it's gray. If it's coming down and it starts to turn yellow, you're going to get a flush. That's an algo flush. You get those algo flushes when it turns yellow. If it's turning gray, it's like if it's gray, it's like okay, this is normal. And if you were going to do a Fibonacci thing here, that's probably about the 382 retracement. So you drift down to the 382, you get the buy signal here. Awesome. You don't have to get one, but when you get it, it's a bonus. And then another squeeze, you're off and running. And guess what? You come up to the fire line. Is it going to be resistance this time? No, you get the momentum and you blow right through it. So it really gives you a nice read on the market. Okay. Okay. This was from today. This is when we did the call credit spread. I got in actually a little early, but look at this. We're going down. We're going down. We're going down. Here's the high. Here's the low. Right. So we're starting a rally, and we're coming up to. I think Trendy John calls this the golden pocket. I always just called this the ideal confluence. But you get between the 50 and the 618, and we're gray. Oh my God. So it's gray, 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 gray. Dear God, that's about as perfect as you can get is that short into kind of the pocket, that 50 and 618, and there's no momentum. You short, that's, call credit spread by puts. And then and then the perfect scenario is you start to roll over. Oh my God. And then you start picking up momentum again. And that's just, you're just kind of licking your chops. Love, love, love that setup. Okay. And that's something where I'm looking for is if I am looking at, we're coming up to a retracement here, let's look for that 50 and 618. And, if there's no momentum there, I'm absolutely going to take it because if there's momentum, we could blow through it, right? Momentum's more rare. But that was it was such a clean trade today. And the challenge with stuff like this is because, it's easy to get enamored with the idea of like, oh my God, we're going to go back and test the highs. No, we're not. I love this example. So that again, my intention for the stuff was more swing trading and big trades, but it's like this turns out this thing that's just fantastic for intraday trades as well. Yeah, perfect halfback today, right? So yeah, Nick, great question. Does this work with quant pivots? There, yeah. So everything I'm talking about with fibs, think of it with quant pivots as well. In fact, let's show you where's my where's my charts? Where's my charts? Um, well, I'll find it in a minute. I've got a chart of the quant pivots and stuff like that today because I was watching them against it. And it was, oh, here we go. So, here's, again, this is a little bit of a different chart, but so here is look at this. This is the S&Ps from this morning. And we go up to the 4-hour quant pivot and we turn gray and we drift down from there, right? Um, and on the NASDAQ, I remember because we got to H2, right? And we got to H2, we got momentum, momentum, momentum. We got to H2, we turn gray, and then it just kind of farts over from there. Now look at this. If you're trying to short against H1, um, I'm not going to short against H1 if we got blue bars because I've just learned that I'm trying to reduce the amount of pain and suffering that I have. And so anyway, I found it. So I love the quant pivots, and this just tells me it's like, you know what? In this case, let's let this ride a little bit, and then I can short it up here. So I found that to be super useful. Super useful. Okay. Yeah, good question. So the reversal candle is also a very unique set of circumstances. If in this particular situation, I do not, so let's say I'm long, I'm going to hold on. We get up here. This is a normal exit point anyway. If we're blue, I'll hang on and see if we got more. Once we turn gray and I realize that the momentum is over, this trade's done. That trade's done. So the reversals are nice kind of when they happen, but if you're going momentum into a strong resistance level and you turn gray, you get out. So gray is your exit at that point. That makes sense, especially for a day trade. Just like here. So, we did not get an arrow here, right? We didn't get an arrow here. We did get arrows up here when momentum was exhausting, but there's no arrow here because there's no momentum to exhaust. Microsoft, this is from today. The market is shaky. Tesla's getting creamed. Microsoft, new all-time highs with Momo. So, we're coming up to new all-time highs. It's like, great, let's hold on to this because it's not showing, this is again a 2-minute chart, kind of ignore the noise here, but you've got, momentum on all these time frames. Let's give it a chance here. And this is, and I still have this. So on Microsoft, we've got a butterfly for tomorrow's expiration. We're going to see, could this get up to 470? But more importantly, we've got a call debit spread 15 days out with the idea that this could turn into something interesting. And so I'm just playing the momentum on this. And if I get a loss of momentum on a larger time frame, or typically in a debit spread like this, if I can get to like 70% of the debit, so that would be like $14, I would just get out because, debit spreads, at 70% of the debit, it's hard to get the rest of that. Not only do you have to go through the sold strike, but you got to get close to expiration. So 70% of the debit done. So that's what we're looking for that on there. Okay. So again, just some reminders here on the momentum. This is IONQ. This is a trade we did. So on the hourly, you can see there's momentum, all that kind of fun stuff. But what's easier then is if you just have one chart. So this is a 2-minute chart, and then I can see at a glance what's happening on the 2-minute chart, 4-minute chart, and 10-minute chart. In this case, they all have momentum to the upside, and you're gray here. And that's fine. It just kind of shows you like where the momentum is at that point in time. And again, it's a move from 46 to 48. The Coinbase trade, this was to the downside. And same thing, you get confidence. It's like, man, it was at 268. But once we got this yellow momentum, it's like, great, let's just ride this. And we rode it all the way to 240. So this just kept on going. This was net. Somebody asked me about this last time. And, here's a squeeze. And when you have a squeeze, yeah, you're typically looking at like about 8 bars, right? And, get out at the 1272 extension. In this case, it just kept going. Now, normally you wouldn't really know. And in fact, I would just typically get out because it's like, oh, we're at the 1618. Let's get out. But the bars are blue. Like, again, all the 5 unique things that have to come together that define momentum, according to my experience with assistance from ChatGPT, those all have to be happening concurrently in order to get the blue bar. So, we want to stick with it. And then what's interesting with this is that once you get the reversal, man, that thing goes down pretty hard. So the reversals in and of themselves are actually interesting trades. I do want to note that it's very, very, very rare to see this on a monthly chart. But note that in 2020 on Tesla, and this is where I had like $6 million trades on Tesla, shocking, we had Monster Momo on a monthly chart. So you can bet that I'm going to be looking to see what stocks have Monster Momo on the monthly chart because that essentially seems like it helps, right? Now I love this. I couldn't do this on a 15-minute chart on Thinkorswim. You can't go back that far. But you remember my first now look at the Tesla $10, right? It was actually like 150, but this was all pre-split. So this was January 14th, 2014. And Tesla had been doing nothing. In October, it was doing nothing. In November, it was selling off. Gray, gray, gray. And then there's this day where, you start to reverse. And I didn't get in until right here. And what's interesting is when I go back and look at this, and again, I didn't have this tool back in 2014. I didn't have this tool 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. Um, Look at this thing, monster momentum. And had I had a like 30-minute chart, it would have been like this too. And so I just thought this was so cool because, again, instinctively, I was like, I know there's something special going on here. And now that I'm able to kind of go back and look at it, I can say, yes, indeed. I wasn't able to quantify it. I wasn't able to explain it. I was just like, no, I recognize that something interesting is happening here. And now I'm able to quantify it, which, hell to the yes, is so much easier when you can quantify it. Bitcoin, right? We all are fans of Bitcoin, and I'm talking about the reversal here. So you got the reversal of exhaustion to the downside here at 75,000. We start and now look, sustained daily bar momentum is hard, but look at this. We got some momentum here, and then we're gray. No sell signals. We're you can move up when it's gray. That's fine, but then you get some momentum, and then you get the sell signal. What's happening since then? We're just selling off, we're selling off, we're selling off. We have a squeeze, right? So again, if you're long Bitcoin, now again, if you're long forever, you don't care about this stuff. But this is also why I was buying puts on Coinbase and I was buying puts on IBIT because we got this longer term exhaustion in Bitcoin. And I'm not expecting that we're gonna, go to 50,000, but for the short term, it's exhausted to the upside, and that's a trade. Yeah, very different from 10x. So 10x, I like 10x because it tells you kind of the trend, but it doesn't identify momentum. So does that make sense? So if you looked at 10x, these could all be green bars on under 10x because it's like, oh, ADX is over 20, great. But it's not letting you know that the momentum is over or that the momentum, so it's a huge, huge difference. I'm a fan of 10x bars. It's a totally different ball of wax. Think of it as 10x bars is showing you the primary trend, and then this is showing you extreme momentum that happens a very rare amount of time, and that's where you're gonna, that's where you have the opportunity to make some really decent money. The other thing about gray that I really like is that, look, if you've got momentum, in this case, yellow momentum to the downside, if you come down to a tree line, which is famous for being strong support, it blows right through it as if it's not even there. Okay. As if it's not even there. However, if you come up to a fire line and you're gray, you can be pretty confident that we're going to be hanging out there for quite a bit. Okay. You need like a squeeze or something to build up here. That's why gray is good too, because it gives you confidence that a level is going to hold, whether it's a voodoo line like this on a daily chart or like that 50 to 618 retracement towards the end of the day, right? It was gray bars. We're not, there's not a huge worry that it's going to blow through that. Okay, so a question that comes up is how to find them. And the good news is that we've also built a scanner around this. And again, this was from like last week, so it's not current. We could look at it, what's happened up today. I've got 4 scans on this, but I'm looking for like, okay, here's Momo continuation up. So at the time, all of these had Momo continuation to the upside. And if we look at one of these, and so, all these at the time had Momo continuation to the upside. And then, but what about reversals too? And I love this on snow because I'm also like, okay, great. What about some reversals to the downside? Now you can look at this on 30-minute charts. I'm frankly more interested on daily charts on big ones. And you can like, oh my God, okay. So and so you can do Momo reversal down, Momo reversal up, and then you can do also continuation, momentum continuation up, momentum continuation down. And I like to run the scan quick at the end of the day, and that kind of sets up potential trades for the next day. So I like that. That's a nice way to kind of narrow it down. Obviously, some of these, I'm not going to look at. You can refine everything here. Maybe even just look at the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, and that's it. And but I've got this where I'm just looking at any optionable stock that has weekly options, and that's typically it's going to get rid of a lot of trash, so to speak. Um, what else here? Oh, okay, so someone asked earlier about options. So, look, if you got a liquid option, so in this case, this was the 595 call on the SPY from the other day, and you can see it's starting the day at 20 cents, and then you get some monster Momo, and it goes up to like $2.20. So I think it's a little cleaner, frankly, just to do like the SPY or the ES, but you can do the option itself, especially if it's liquid. And then, here on the 2-minute chart, you can see you're getting momentum to the downside, et cetera, et cetera. So you can totally do this on the actual option itself, which I think is pretty cool. All right, so here's some comments from a couple of people that have tested this out. And again, I'm learning more from how other people are using this. So John, just to close the loop again, actually, let me do this. I'm doing this in reverse. So one of our members, I think that JC nailed it. It's kind of obvious now, but seriously, this one is way cool. This is my 3rd day with it, and it's now on my short list of things I won't be able to look at the market again without. Okay, and that's important, right? That's when it's kind of like, oh, this gives you such valuable information that it's like, okay, if this isn't on my chart, I feel like I'm missing, like I'm naked, right? Wondering what is the Momo saying? Looking under hood, I can see this is blah blah. And some quick thoughts. I totally get the balance of too many and too few triggers, as you say. I think this hits the sweet spot really well. I love the calming, peaceful gray bars. Okay, the lack of Momo and the nothing to see here gray helps keep my trades on track, even though through the chop, no signal is a big signal, right? That's great because that's when you're kind of looking for that drift up and nothing too crazy, and that's great if you're doing spreads and things like that too. Um, and then a couple more comments again from a user here. This was a trade I did, gap down into support. I watched the 4-minute Momo from slowing. We're going from yellow. We go from yellow, we get the green arrow, we go to gray, and that's when I get in. That's when I get in there. And that's, I was able to time that fairly precisely, adding frosting, anyway, and that's great. So I love that extra confidence to get into the trade. And that's great because, like, oh my God, is this thing going to stop? What's going on here? And then, yeah, okay, so we got that. So cherry on top. Yeah, so more comments like that. That's great. This is from Lorna, and I always value what Lorna says. She's just got such a breadth of knowledge on the stuff. And okay, I did this. Here's a Momo reversal on the 2-hour quant pivots, and boom, boom, boom. We come down, we get the arrow, and once you go gray, that's nice because you can see that the momentum has shifted there. All the things there, and then just kind of let it ride. And this is from Heather. I entered the SPX put butterfly, centered at 59.75. Just as the power hour was starting, I altered this trade in our small lot room. We didn't just have price drifting lower. There's momentum behind that move down that dragged us all the way back to 58.75. Heather, I took 2 contracts, made $615. Awesome. So what's interesting about all this is that while my inspiration for this tool was capturing momentum on these larger swing trades for those like 7-figure trades, that was the only reason I was like really diving into this. It turns out that this is a killer tool for day trading as well, to the point where I'm also now using it on my day trading charts. Okay. So that was a little added bonus that I wasn't expecting. So I'm, zero DT options. It's actually making it a lot cleaner to trade. I'm like, okay, that's great because every little piece of edge can help you there. Okay. So that's great. Anyway, let's see how our let's see what is happening here. Let's see how our option is doing. All right, so the option that we got at the beginning of this, the 59.50, when we got those momentum signals, so we're up $1,450. Well, $1,325 now. I like it. Do we hold it overnight? Do we take the money and run? We can see. Let's see what the momentum is doing here. We're kind of hanging out here. I think if let's see if we actually can, eke out 59.57 here. So making a little bit of money, earning while we learning is how I guess how it goes. Okay. So at the end of the day, and I've always talked about this, is that you really as a trader, you only have one job, is to make sure that your equity curve, starts the year, at your baseline at the lower left of your screen, and at the end of the year, it's at the upper right of your screen. And yeah, you're gonna have some things along the way, but if you're consistent, if you're following a plan, if you get those occasional bigger trades, that's your job. It doesn't matter if Elon and Trump are in a fight. It doesn't matter what the interest rates are. In fact, turn off the news, follow the charts, follow the signals, and that's your goal as a trader. So that's it. You don't need to know a lot, just that. And the secret essentially with this is being able to go with the flow of what is happening and continually remind yourself that what you think may happen is immaterial. And I think that's frankly my biggest challenge in trading, because I'm like, yeah, we're going to 6,000. Well, we might be, but we might not. There might be a tweet that derails that. And so I want to have tools on my chart that tell me that the way I'm thinking is not correct, and I should surrender myself to the charts. Surrender yourself to the markets, just as when you're swimming in the ocean. I love swimming in the ocean, is you got to surrender yourself to the waves or you're going to get destroyed. And it's a very similar thing there. And so I think this tool, I love it because it helps me with that quite a bit. It's important to control the emotions of fear and greed. I think the hardest thing in trading is, if you're in a big winner, is getting scared and getting out way too early. And then you see it going on without you and you get FOMO, and then you buy the top and then you're just dead. And that's the story of many, many tragedies right there. So just, take the emotion out of it and go with the flow. All right. So what is this? So, so this is a tool, and I get some people, there are, if you're like, oh my God, another tool. I like to share these with you because the only reason I would create something like this is because it's not like, oh gosh, I think I need to create another tool. No, create a new tool sucks. It's hard. You got to do a lot of testing. I got to spend a lot of time in front of my computer. I don't like doing it. But when I get compelled to do it, like, oh God, it's like that idea that's in your head and you just got to get out of your head. That's when it's like, okay, this is a good idea. And starting things like, how do I quantify, you know, what it means to make $1 million trade? How can I show this to my kids without, forcing them to spend 15,000 hours trading the S&Ps in order to get their arms wrapped around it? Because, look, I'm glad I did it, but it doesn't mean I want my kids to do it, right? Can I quantify my experience in an easy to use tool? And that's what this is. And if you're resonating with that, that's why I'm doing it. And if you're like, that's great, thanks for sharing, not for me, totally get it. I totally get it. I totally get it. This is essentially when you're trading, and whatever you do is when you kind of, when you get really good at something, you build on that and you take whatever layers of experience you've had. At this point, it's like 30 plus years, and you take that knowledge and you're like, okay, now based on what I know right now, what is the intuition that I need to quantify? And that changes and it develops and it grows over time. And that's life, that's learning, that's developing, and all the things. And so when I get excited about something like that, it's because I want to use it. And hopefully you're looking at this, and if not, I guess not hopefully, but if you are looking at this and going like, geez, that might really help me quite a bit. That's why I'm doing this. All right. So what are we doing here? There's a basic package for $797 where you get to join me on the Saturday class that we're doing this Saturday, which is in like 48 hours, where we're going to talk about this in more detail. Here's the nuances and all that kind of stuff. This will include the Momo continuation tool. Okay. That's the um, the blue bars and the yellow bars and the reversal tool. Those are the big arrows. Okay. And then also the scanner. And there's four scans. You can make more. There's different ways you can do it and stuff like that too. So I think that's great. Um, so so with that, you get all those things. Let me get I need to get a different color here. Let's get a box frame. Okay. So for 797, you get the class, the continuation tool, the version tool, and the scanners. What I recommend, if you resonate with this, I think that's a no-brainer. The pro version, so you get all this, of course, that we just talked about, plus you get the multiple time frame labels. So, and that's what this is. So you can see at a glance, like, okay, great, what's going on all these other time frames? You know, we got a buy signal on the hourly chart, by the way, on the S&Ps. Okay, great. I didn't know that until I just looked at that. So, plus you get 2 days of live trading. The live trading is good because obviously a lot of the stuff, if it's intraday, it's easier to explain to you real time as it's happening. And so, look, the live trading part, a lot of people don't do. I do it because A, I'm confident that it works. So I'm fine live trading it in front of other humans, like in my own account. Like I have no problem with that. But B, did I say one or two? I don't know, A or B. Two/B, it's also the best way to learn. So if there's a saying like you can read 3 books on playing golf, but if you've never played golf before, and after reading 3 books, you go to swing a club, you're going to suck because you don't have any practical experience. And it's the same thing in trading. I can explain this to you, but until you start swinging the club in front of someone who knows what he's doing, it makes it a little tentative, right? So, we're going to trade together. I'm going to share my screen. This is what we're doing. You can ask me questions. And so I recommend that. And then if you're kind of like, okay, what else you got? This sounds cool. Um, this also includes an additional 2 days of live trading. Okay, that's online, plus a ticket to our live event. So we're gonna have a 1 day live event. I think it's November 7th in Austin. There'll be a poker tournament, a full live trading, and this is just in-person event. It's limited to 100 people. There's 100 seats. This is just more like, look, we haven't had to get together in 2 years because the private equity firm that owned us didn't think it was a profitable line item. Well, now that I bought them out and they're gone, guess what? We're gonna go back to doing things that are fun, and we're gonna do a live event. And I have this my funny saying now with a private equity firm is there's a saying, it's like we don't do things because they're easy. We do things because we thought they'd be easy. So anyway, that was my experience with them. Um, so anyway, so the indicators right now are for toss and trading view. If you have like E-Trade or Fidelity and you're like, oh my God, I love this. Look, you can keep your broker. You don't have to get rid of your broker. Download Thinkorswim, put like $100 in it. They don't charge you monthly data feeds or anything like that. And we have a lot of clients who will just, they use Thinkorswim for free and chart it, and then they take the signals on Fidelity or E-Trade or whatever it is they like to use. That we're broker agnostic. We use a lot of us use Tastyworks, Interactive Brokers, Thinkorswim, on and on and on. Is this annual? So no, this isn't a subscription. It's just a one-time thing. So one-time fee, it's yours. We do have a live trading room. If you're not part of our live trading room, and you want to check that out, I think at some point, we'll show you a link where you could try it out. That's where I'm posting these trades and stuff like that too. And that's kind of it's a good way, it's, again, a good way to kind of learn and stuff like that too. This is the link, simplertrading.com/monster Momo. Let me see. And I think if you're a member already, you get a slight discount. So just when you log in, you'll see, if you're a member, you'll see that you get kind of a slight discount on it. So that's a plus too. Just thank you for being a member, all the fun things. Let me bring up the website. Dun, 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 dun. /monster-momo. I guess it's always good to make sure that it works, right? Okay. So yeah, so when you type it in or you click on the link, I think you'll come to this page. You can click here and it's kind of clear, right? So with this, you get the green check marks. With this, you get more green check marks, and with the here, you get all the green check marks. And there's more explanations on the page. The live trading, the Austin event, the poker tournament's fun. It's good money management. The scanner, reversal tool, multi-time frame labels, all the fun things there. So that all is pretty cool. Yeah, so good question. So when is this stuff happening? So the Saturday class is this Saturday, June 7th, which is in 2 days. Lord help me. That's coming up quick. If you cannot attend it, it'll be like, 12 to 4 Central, give or take. If you can't attend it live, totally okay, because it will absolutely be recorded and you can watch it at your leisure. And then so the live trading here will be on June 11th and 12th. Typically, it's like the first 2 hours of the day and then like the last hour and a half of the day. And then there's going to be two additional live tradings later, I think in July. Like we're going to space it out a little bit. And then the live event, I believe, is November 7th in Austin, Texas. All right. So yeah, and then I think there's a few more. So that's that. Let me see what else is here is on the presentation. And everything else, just kind of explanation. This is great. Right now we have the indicators available on Thinkorswim or TradingView. Sometimes they'll become available for, if we get a lot of people like, oh, what about NinjaTrader? That's certainly something we can look at. Again, I recommend if you're like, okay, I don't have Thinkorswim or TradingView, you can order, Thinkorswim is free. Just, you can download it, put in $100. You don't get charged anything. It's free. And you can use that for the charts and then you can trade wherever you want. Um, this is the room where we're going to be doing it. We actually like this room as part of the University of Texas AT&T Center because like there's stadium seating, dedicated internet, and it's easy to see everything. And we don't, we're not looking to do a huge one. It's 100 people. That's it. This is the poker tournament. Um, they're a lot of fun. If you've never played Texas Hold'em, that's fine. You actually buy in with like $50 of your own money, so you actually feel it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great Texas Hold'em is a great way to learn money management, and we have prizes for the winner. I think the winner you get all the cash, right? So I think one time someone won like it was like 3 grand or something like that, and that's awesome. Um, well, you got to get here. You still got to get here. Lima, that's awesome. Any questions, of course, you can call us 512-266-8659. Email us support@simplertrading.com. Also, too, if you do want to do kind of like a interest-free, we do have a partnership with PayPal. So you just, click on PayPal and then they will give you 0% interest for 6 months with no payments. So we've had people do this, they trade, make the money, and then pay for it. Obviously, there's no guarantee that that's going to work for you. But they don't even start charging interest for 6 months. So that's cool. That's a way to kind of like, all right, well, a way to kind of do it so you can kind of learn and stuff like that. And then again, there is the stuff. And then here is the website. Yeah, so I use this absolutely with the Squeeze Pro. In here, we can look at a couple things here. Let's see. AVGO, let's see. That had earnings is down $10 on an expected move of 16, so it's within the expected move. Yeah, so here it is with the Squeeze Pro, which is nice. If we look at Microsoft here on the daily chart, you can see it's just kind of drifting up. Not a lot of momentum. You don't see a lot of momentum on the daily chart. So that's just kind of the way it is. Like but you see it more on smaller time frames. If we look at like CRWV, if you bring it up on a daily, you're not going to see any signals because it's a newer stock. There's not enough history. So when that happens, just say, great, let me, okay, let me look at a 2 hour chart. And now you can see, there's the momentum and all that kind of fun stuff. Tesla, Tesla, Again, what's great about this is, if you see this, you're just like, like Tesla, wow, it's coming down to support, right? Let's just say like, you got your eyes on, you got your eyes on this, right? And you're like, oh my God, it's coming down to support. And, that looks great. And well, if it's yellow momentum like this, and here it's gray, right? But there's no reversal. So you want to be really careful. It's like, okay, but this is support, right? And you can see we just keep going. And then from there, kind of the same thing. So let's say that you're thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to look at, say, Fibonacci, right? Okay, so I got the swing high to swing low, and I want to buy the move down into the 50 and 618 retracement because that's, the golden pocket, whatever you want to call it. You're going to get destroyed on a day like this. Remember when we were trading the S&Ps earlier today, we did take that trade into the 50 and 618 because why? The bars were gray, there was no momentum. Here you walk through as if they don't exist, okay? You walk through as if they don't exist. And then finally, we did get a little bit of a bounce here at the 100% retracement. And if you notice that, I think it was on the 15-minute chart, you actually got, once we hit that 100% level, the full range, then and only then did we show signs of a reversal. Okay. And so that's the kind of stuff that, again, it helps you stay out of trouble. Like, what is going on here in Tesla? Dear God. What's happening there. So again, it can kind of help with that kind of stuff, which is nice. IWM 3-minute chart. It's very specific. Let's see what happened. So flush, 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 get a little arrow, and boom. What was the other one? See, there was another one I was thinking about today. Oh, silver. Yeah, silver had an interesting move. Now, again, 3-minute chart. That's a lot of noise. I would say, consider at least initially looking at stuff like on a 30-minute chart. Nice move there on silver, right? What else? What else was going on today? Oh yeah, TLT. Let's see if on the daily chart that thing. I mean, we're getting a little bit of reversals here, like on the 30-minute. Finally, right? We got that reversal here. If we look at a daily chart, this thing's been pretty ugly. Where I was intrigued here is that we finally got. I initially got in here on this reversal bar, and then we failed again. So that did happen. Added to it here, and now just kind of looking to see, can we actually get something going here. TLT, if you're used to trading like different stocks and things like that, TLT can be kind of aggravating, but it is fun because when you get a move, it tends to trend fairly well. Fairly well. Let me see what else were we looking at today. Watch list. Let me switch this to 7. And I'm just looking at like Netflix. So Netflix is interesting here. So again, daily chart, right? So we had that initial momentum here, and now we're still just kind of drifting up, and that can happen. It's like we're not getting, you can drift up gray. It just means that the intensity, this is like panic. Get me in, get me in, get me in, and you can still go up. And on a daily chart, you don't, momentum like that is actually pretty rare. It's really kind of stand out when it does happen. Um, it's kind of like when I see something like this, it's like, okay, we're going higher. And if you see a red arrow, it's, is if the trend is still intact, that's fine. Remember, on a smaller time frame, you're going to see more of these kind of up and downs and stuff like that. The main thing though is you're not seeing any yellow. You're not seeing any momentum to the downside, and you saw a little bit here. So it is kind of keeping those, all those larger kind of time frames in mind as well. Let's see what else here can we look at. Like a stock like McDonald's, you don't get a lot of lasting moves. It's just kind of so on something like McDonald's, look, McDonald's is probably going to go forever. Anytime there's yellow bars and a green arrow, that's a buy signal. Yellow bars and a green arrow, that's a buy signal. McDonald's isn't necessarily something I want to short. It trends up and stuff like that too. Let's see what else on here has been interesting. Goldman Sachs. Yeah, again, daily chart, not too. Um, Adobe. See this boom, 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 and then we get the momentum. So once the moment, this to me is a fascinating trade in and of itself. Once the momentum's done, you actually that's kind of tradable. So you get the flush, and think of this. I always like to think of this as it's someone else's stop out as your entry, and that's how I think of that. Someone else's stop out is your entry, and that's kind of the golden rule is in trading as you kind of get into it. It's like, okay, the best entry is someone else's stop out. The best entry is someone else's, unfortunately, pain. Spotify daily chart, kind of rocking and rolling here, right? And if we were going to drill down and look at this on, say a 30-minute chart, it's like, man, this thing is going, it's going, it's going. Again, gray bars doesn't mean it's done. It just means that the veracity of the momentum is no longer defined. And so that's when you kind of, okay, great. Let me just trail up a stop. We don't have any sell signals. It's just kind of drifting up, instead of exploding up. So interesting stuff like that. Pins. God, I haven't looked at pins, PINS, in forever. Nice, yeah. With Goldman Sachs on a 30-minute chart, kind of hanging out there. So, again, it's just kind of identifying those moments in time. If we look at the scanner, I don't know. I haven't looked yet and see which one's kind of set up today. So we can look real quick. Da, 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 da. Detach. I need to detach. Right. So if we look at the scanner here, and right now I have four scanners. So Momo reversal down. And so I've got four scanners. I'll share those with you. Kind of working on a couple other ones as well to build out. So, on a daily chart, Wells Fargo, CoreWeave, Walmart. Let's take a look at a couple of those and just kind of see what comes up here. And again, since I scanned on a daily chart, what I want to do here is put this on a daily chart and let's see. We had Walmart, so I didn't know Walmart got a signal, and it did. Okay, interesting, right? So that's nice because it shows you what happened that day. And then I also, of course, am interested in because a lot of the times momentum is going to be the upside, right? So if we come over here and just say, all right, let's look at some Momo, if I can find them, da 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 da, Momo continue. So continuation up on a daily. So that's not the reversal. That's just going to be more, do we have some blue bars kind of continuing to the upside here? And hood, right? Let's look at some of these. And I just sort by volume, like what's the highest volume ones. So, great. Let's look at hood. What's happening, with hood? So, look, we got some momentum there. Great. Okay. That's helpful. What about is there any reversals, stuff that's been selling off? And of course, we had a lot of these, more earlier. Um, ah, Momo continuation up, Momo reversal up. That's what I was looking for. Scan. This is a lot faster if you do it after hours, by the way, or before the market opens. And, like three stocks I've never traded before, but let's look at them. Doesn't mean, Macy's, OG single letter stock. All right. Interesting. That might be an interesting trade, right? I don't know. I've never traded Macy's. So sometimes weird stuff like this will come up. Okay, great. Chemicals. I don't know. So it doesn't mean I'm gonna have to take a trade. I typically like to see that a trade that I like, but of all the universe of stocks, there's only three that got reversals today, right? And that's pretty interesting. And then of course, is there anything now that's got momentum continuation? Oh, do I need to continuation down? Maybe that's down. I don't think it is. So I need to, yeah. So I need to tweak it and make sure I got the momentum continuation down. So anyway, that's just a way to kind of, look at that stuff as well. Yeah, Andrew, so it'll depend a lot on what Tesla does, right? So I did buy Tesla on that buy signal. And, if we look at after hours right now, so again, just to review, I didn't, I wasn't going to catch a falling knife on Tesla today. I have no, you don't win any awards for catching a falling knife. There's no award ceremony at the end of the year saying like, congratulations for catching the bottom. But I don't mind is especially, and 15-minute charts kind of my default intraday reversal. So here you can see like we got the green arrow, and when Tesla was at about $280, and we closed a little bit profitable. And then after, and I don't know where it's going to open up in the morning, right? I mean, maybe I personally think that the market overreacted. But right now we're trading up almost $8 after hours. So we're continuing to go higher. Now in the morning, we may be down here or we may be up here, but I've got defined risk. So I do have one option, the $300 call that expires tomorrow. So in a perfect world, we gap up and I just close that out. And then I'd like to give the other one some more room. But the main point here is that, I'm not clairvoyant. I just thought, I know that when you get this much momentum to the downside and then you get an exhaustion reversal signal, the odds of a decent bounce are decent. And so I structured the trade in a way that, it's like, okay, well, if this trade doesn't work out, am I going to be okay? Yeah, it wasn't like, I'm not going to do this monster trade. I'm not buying deep in the money calls. I think that's and this is part of what I'm going to talk about on Saturday as well, is when you're doing this, is how do you structure the trades so that you're not freaking out, right? And I think that's really important. And I think it's on something like that, what you want to be able to do is just say like, okay, how can I sleep well at night? So let's say that, normally, let's say you buy an option and you're normally like, you know what, I'm willing to risk 2 points. Okay. So if you buy an option at 10, your stop's $8.8, right? Well, look, if you buy an option at two, then you just risk the debit. Like if that goes to zero, that's your $2 risk. And so that's kind of the easiest way to do sometimes like this. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because look, it expires tomorrow. So I have to fully accept that this just goes to zero. But because of that signal, and right now it's up $8 after hours, right? Again, I don't know where it's going to open at this point. But hey, if we pop up in the open and I can sell this at $4 or $5, awesome. And then I've got a little bit larger debit spread. I did this as a debit spread just to kind of, manage it a little bit better, but it's for next week. And I got a little profit in already. And, could I sell this for a double? And that's what I'm looking for there. And that's, again, not a huge trade. It's just a reversal trade, but I feel confident taking it because it's the opposite side of that extremity. Um, yeah, could this be on futures other than ES or NQ? The answer is absolutely yes. If there's something you'd like me to bring up, I do trade Bitcoin futures. Those are kind of monster futures, like one Bitcoin futures, like five Bitcoin. So, I like, that, so you can see that, the buy and sell signals there. If you like gold, gold actually trends pretty well. And, you get the wow, momentum up, you get the gray bars kind of peter out. Oh, momentum, those are decent moves. That's $40 move to the downside. MBT, micro Bitcoin futures. Yeah, so same obviously as Bitcoin. And again, what I like here is that you just got that momentum, right? This is momentum, 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 momentum to the downside. And then if we come over here and let's check and see how our futures are doing that we got at the beginning of this. And we got in with the momentum and we've kind of slowed down a little bit, but again, it's after hours, so it is a little slow. But we're not, we're just kind of drifting up here. Um, again, nothing's on fire or anything like that, but we haven't had any sell signals. But we're still, again, it's a little, kind of just hanging out here. Nothing too special, but also if you look at the Nasdaq futures here, because these things move together, right? It's like, okay, well, what are the Nasdaq futures doing here? And the Nasdaq futures here are getting some fresh buy signals. Oops. So we got a fresh buy signal here on the 5-minute chart on the Nasdaq. So, could that help the S&Ps? Nasdaq options overnight, they're pretty thin. So typically, if I'm going to do any options on futures overnight, I'm going to look at S&Ps. And okay, where is my chart that I need? And so if I look at the S&P options here, okay, so we've been in this trade for about an hour and a half, and hey, it's up $1,800. And last I checked, that I guess that could almost pay if you did this trade, you could pay for the pro class, right? So that's pretty sweet. So anyway, again, just kind of a live example of obviously this could go away pretty quickly too. I don't really want to hold this overnight. I'll see if we're at 24. Let's see if we can get out of this at what do we get it at 24.60? So could we get out of it at 28 at $29? And I'll just kind of work that order. And again, just something to be in. There, just got filled. So $2,200. And so again, I put this trade on at the beginning of this webinar, right? Live account, and just taking a simple momentum signal, all the kind of fun things there. Um, and we got in at oh gosh, I know we got in at 24.60, whatever. We made $2,200. So it's done. I mean, frankly, I should probably have kept it, but I just kind of, I like to show an example of, look, we started getting momentum, we bought it, not too complicated. If this was, if this was, during the open, we would give it a little bit more time. But, again, just a way to kind of, if you follow the trade, you made enough money to, go to the pro class and, have some money left over, right? So that's always kind of cool. Yeah, and if you did, yeah, Bruce, and if you did the straight S&Ps, even better. And the other thing it looks like, again, the opposite today was the opposite side of panic, right? Tesla here is pushing up now after hours. Again, we'll see where it opens. Right now, it's up 10 points after hours. So anyway, it'll be. I probably need to buy those options back, right? But anyway, that's a cool way to end it. All right, I'm gonna leave this up. And again, I think I'm excited about this. It's helping me make money because I'm seeing the markets a little bit differently from us. I'm whatever it was I was trying to do instinctually, which can be hard if you're not in the right frame of mind. Now I'm just able to map it. I'm getting a lot of great feedback from other people that are giving me ideas on how to use it because they're like, yeah, I know you're using this for $1 million trades, but this is pretty good on the futures and zero DTE. And it's like, I agree, I concur. So I'm doing that too. And there we go. All right, guys. Well, we've hung out for an hour and 45 minutes. I will be doing the close tomorrow. If you're in the trading room, if there's any charts or anything you'd like to look at, happy to share. If you are buying tonight, the indicators are ready. You can start playing around with them, start setting them up. Lorna's done a great video. I'll be sharing stuff, Saturday during the live trading, all that kind of fun stuff. And again, I doing these webinars, putting them together, it's a lot of work. I would rather be, I like doing this, but I'd rather be watching a movie. I could rather watch, season 2 of Andor. So I don't do this lightly. This isn't like, oh my God, I got to do a webinar. I'm only going to do it if I think it's something that's worthwhile to put out in the world. And, obviously I think this is worthwhile to put out in the world. I think it's going to help you. I think it's going to help me. And at the end of the day, if we can do this in a way where it doesn't stress us out, we're not working out our childhood demons on our trading account, and we can make some extra pocket money, or we can, if we have a dream of doing this full time, this is a tool that can help. That's why I do this, because I remember all the challenges that I had to go through to get to the point where I could do this full time. And I really, uh, don't understand why I stuck it out through all those years, but I'm glad that I did. I think trading gives you a unique perspective on life, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm always, encouraging other people to give it a shot as well. I am fully familiar with all the demons that can come out when a person is trading. And so my goal is to help eradicate that, or at least help you manage those demons, because, it's not like they're going to go away, but at least, you can prevent them from running down your mouse hand and uh, working out your childhood trauma on your P&L, which, that doesn't help anybody. Like cutting off your nose to spite your face, kind of a thing. Yeah, season 2 of Andor. I confess I've already watched season 1 and 2, but I want to watch it again. It really was a great show. I just want to get now I want to get my kids to watch it. Anyway, it'll be an interesting morning tomorrow. You've got nice move here in Tesla. Futures are continuing to go up. So I think, today was kind of we got NFP tomorrow, right? So Anyway, see you guys tomorrow in the room. Have a great night, and see you on Saturday for those that are joining. And everybody else, have a fan. Well, everybody, whether you are or not, have a fantastic night, and thanks for joining as always.